Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a huge treat for you. This is a full compilation of the opening arc covering the story from the very beginning. If you love watching a modern guy get thrown into a ruthless martial arts world and survive it with nothing but his brains, this one is going to be a blast. The story starts strong, gets even better as it builds, and by the time you reach the later parts you'll be completely hooked. So don't drop off early, stay with it, because the full video gets more exciting, funnier, and more intense the deeper it goes. We've put the entire opening stretch together so you can binge the story from start to finish and enjoy every major moment in one place. Before we jump in, make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a recap. Alright, grab your snacks, get comfortable, and let's dive in. So our story begins with a man realizing a harsh truth. There is no such thing as a beautiful or peaceful death. For 33 years, his life was completely below average. Like many others, he left his home province and ended up in Noryangjin, spending 7 long years desperately studying for a level 9 civil service exam. But on this night, his exhausting routine comes to a sudden, violent halt. Out of nowhere, a speeding car rushed toward him. A sickening crash echoes through the streets. The impact hurls his body through the air, crashing onto the cold, hard asphalt. The car doesn't even slow down, leaving him behind to bleed out alone in the dark. The real heartbreak wasn't his failure, it was his mother. After his father passed away, she did every grueling job imaginable to support him, working as an insurance agent, a nursing home assistant, a snack shop worker, and a florist. She covered his tuition and exam fees, leaving herself with nothing but overwhelming debt. Instead of repaying her, he only caused her stress, and last year she passed away from pancreatic cancer. Lying on the cold asphalt after being hit during his shift, he wonders if his mother would even be proud to see him in the afterlife. Even though he was completely incompetent to her, he was everything. As his vision starts to fade, he notices something on the road. He painfully reaches his hand out toward it. It's his father's necklace, the absolute last keepsake left in his life. Clutching the necklace tight, the darkness closes in and he expects to face death. But instead of dying, he suddenly blinks and opens his eyes. The immense pain from the crash is completely gone. He looks around the strange, ancient-style room in absolute confusion. Wait, why am I still alive? Before he can even process what's happening, a massive flood of memories that don't belong to him forces its way into his brain. He finally realizes the reality of the situation. He has transmigrated into another world, a Murim world where martial arts and cultivation rule everything. And in this world, his name is now Johwi. He opens his eyes to find 2 people watching over him, their worry written all over their faces. Johwi had been unconscious for 3 days straight, and now that he's awake, they can finally relax. As they try to take care of him, he listens to them talking about the local general. In this region, blacksmiths aren't allowed to just forge whatever they want. They need a special official plate, essentially a permission slip from the general, just to legally make an iron sword. Johwi quickly digs through his newly acquired memories to find out who this general actually is. The details make him uneasy. According to his memories, this general is a thoroughly evil person who completely controls the local salt and iron trades, making life a living hell for ordinary workers. Our MC decides to look deeper into his memory to figure out his new family dynamic. The Zhou clan runs an iron chamber, but they're currently a struggling, declining family. His father, Zhou Sun, is a dedicated blacksmith. His mother, Goa Young, is incredibly kind and caring. But as he digs into the family's financial situation, Johwi uncovers a infuriating piece of information. The main reason their iron chamber is failing isn't because his father is a bad blacksmith. It's because they are being heavily scammed by the junior sect leader of the prominent Hwa clan. Remember that official permission plate required by the general to legally forge swords? Well, the Hwa clan's junior sect leader took massive advantage of the Zhou clan's desperate situation. He forced them to pay an astronomical fee of 2,000 silver coins, promising to act as an intermediary and secure that license from the general. Aside from his parents, Johwi meets the rest of his siblings. There's his hot-headed older brother, Jo Hyuk, whose entire personality revolves around a desperate dream to enter the Jianghu and become a martial artist. Finally, his younger sister, Jo Yeon, is sweet but unfortunately very frail and sickly. Sifting through more of his thoughts, our protagonist learns that the previous owner of this body was actually a massive bookworm who possessed a vast amount of academic knowledge. But the moment his mind stumbles upon the name Sama, everything changes. Out of nowhere, his heart begins racing and his blood starts boiling with an intense, unnatural rage. He grips his chest, completely baffled. What is this? I don't even know who this is, so why is this body reacting with so much hatred? It's an alarming mystery, but he has bigger things to worry about right now. He starts mapping out his future. What should his goal be in this brutal new world? Should he try to become a wealthy merchant, a high-ranking politician, or aim for the absolute top and become a god? The answer is obvious. In a cutthroat world like Murim, power is everything. He needs to learn martial arts to survive. And luckily, he has an older brother who practices swordplay every single day. Wanting to see what real Murim martial arts look like, johwi goes outside to watch his brother train. He expects to see something spectacular, but the reality is a complete letdown. His brother is swinging his sword wildly, with zero balance and terrible form. johwi stands there staring blankly. He honestly believes his old elementary school buddy who briefly went to a local kendo club could easily beat his brother in a real fight. He walks over and asks, "Hey, who exactly did you learn these moves from? Which great master taught you this swordplay?" His brother proudly wipes the sweat from his face and puffs out his chest. "A master? Come on. I learned this from my friend. Mind you, I had to treat him to an expensive meal and drinks before he agreed to show me these secret techniques." johwi can't help but openly mock him. "You bought someone a treat to learn. Whatever this is, if you want to get strong, why don't you actually go find a real jianghu master instead of learning garbage from your friend?" His brother's smile disappears and he snaps back angrily. "Do you even know how much I suffered? I traveled across prefectures, begged sex for guidance, and still only managed to learn scraps." Hearing this, johwi realizes just how hard it is for ordinary people to get proper training from the older generation of martial artists. Hearing this, his brother stops completely. He looks at johwi, openly making fun of him with a sigh. "I always knew you were a clueless bookworm little brother, but I seriously didn't know you were this stupid." He shakes his head and tells him about the legendary martial artists of the older generation. He explains that true martial arts legends, the powerhouse grandmasters, belong to massive, elite sects and ancient factions. To ordinary, working-class citizens like their struggling blacksmith family, those legendary figures of the older generation are basically myths. Most regular people live their entire lives and die of old age without ever getting to see a single real master. Smirking, his brother slaps him on the back. "Since finding a grandmaster is impossible, how about I teach you my moves instead?" johwi immediately declines, wanting absolutely nothing to do with that sloppy swordplay, but looking down at his hands, a real sense of purpose forms. If legendary masters won't just appear out of thin air, he will have to forge his own path. He is fully determined to become a true martial artist on his own terms. From that moment on, time begins to move forward, and before long, full 2 months have already passed since johwi first came into this ancient world. When he first realized he was in a martial arts universe, he honestly thought his life was going to become incredibly exciting. He expected to stumble upon secret cultivation techniques, meet legendary strong masters, and go on epic adventures across the land. But what is the actual reality? The comic panels show us his repetitive, exhausting routine. Every single morning, the very first thing johwi does when he wakes up is help out around the house. He has to carry heavy logs and cut firewood alongside his loud older brother. Then, when the afternoon rolls around, things don't get any easier. He has to work by the hot furnace, help make charcoal, and spend his remaining energy sweeping and cleaning the dusty floors of the family iron workshop. There is nothing glamorous or exciting about it. It is just pure backbreaking manual labor. The story takes a sudden, dramatic turn. Out of nowhere, his father brings home a bag of actual silver coins. This is a massive deal for a struggling household. It means they don't have to starve, and for the time being, they don't have to constantly worry about where their next meal is coming from. Naturally, the family is curious. The mother looks up and asks the obvious question, where on earth did a poor blacksmith suddenly get real silver coins? The father hesitates for a moment, and then he reveals a heavy, terrifying truth. He looks his wife in the eye and says, "I borrowed 60 silver coins from a loan shark." The moment those words leave his mouth, the entire room goes dead silent. The cheerful atmosphere completely vanishes. Our MC's mother looks absolutely horrified and loses her temper. She stands up and yells, "What did you just say?" She immediately realizes the dark reality of their situation. Their current comfort, the nice food on their plates, the workshop supplies, everything they have been using for the past few weeks was not earned through profit. It was all funded by a dangerous, life-threatening debt. johwi sits there quietly and with his mature intellect. He immediately understands the gravity of the situation. This is not a small neighborhood problem. In this lawless era, dealing with loan sharks is incredibly dangerous. His father tries to defend his actions, shouting back that he absolutely needed the money just to keep the family business alive. He explains that without buying raw iron ore and materials, the blacksmith workshop would completely die and they would have zero income. He also needed the extra cash to pay for their absolute basic daily necessities. But the terrifying part is the timeline. The father reveals they only have one short month left to pay back every single coin. If they fail, these criminals won't just take the shop, things will end in absolute violence. johwi's father commands them, "Hurry up and eat." Somehow, his father trying to force them to eat a peaceful meal, while a death sentence hangs over their heads makes the whole situation feel 10 times more serious. Later that night, the family is still sitting together trying to finish their dinner, but the atmosphere is incredibly heavy and awkward. Nobody is speaking. Nobody knows how a poor, declining family is going to find 60 silver coins in just 30 days. And right here, in the middle of this high-stakes family crisis, the script introduces a very funny and unexpected moment. While Johwi is sitting there stressed out, he looks over at his father who is talking loudly. Suddenly, a massive wave of foul air hits our main character. His father's breath smells absolutely terrible. It is a seriously unbearable odor. Johwi literally chokes and almost loses his focus on the entire debt situation because the hygiene in this ancient household is just a complete stinky mess. Looking at his dad smacking his lips after dinner, Johwi realizes, okay, the debt is a huge problem, but if I stay in this house, this smell is going to kill me first. I have to do something about this right now. The next morning, Johwi decides to take action. He walks up to his father in the yard and asks if they have any stiff animal fur lying around the workshop. His father looks at him with a puzzled expression and says, "Stiff fur? You must be referring to boar fur." He informs Johwi that their neighbor, Hunter Mo, has a massive supply of boar fur from his hunts, and since he has no use for it, he always gives it away completely for free. His father walks over to the neighbor's place and returns with a massive, heavy sack completely stuffed with raw boar fur. Originally, Johwi only planned to make a few quick, crude toothbrushes, just for his immediate family members so he wouldn't have to suffer during dinner anymore. But when he opens the bag, he realizes there is an overwhelming amount of fur. Since he has nothing better to do with his free time anyway, he figures, why not? Let's just use all of it and build a whole bunch. He sits outside in the courtyard, carefully cutting pieces of wood into small handles, poking tiny holes into them, and tightly packing the stiff boar hair into the slots. It is a simple process that doesn't require any grand martial arts techniques, but it takes time. While he is outside working hard, his cute little sister Yon walks out into the yard, spots him surrounded by wood shavings, and asks, "Brother, what are you doing?" Johwi doesn't want her getting sick in the chilly weather, so he looks up and says, "It's cold out here, go back inside." His little sister gets annoyed, lets out a loud ch, and walks back into the house with a hilarious, dramatic pout on her face. Johwi just smiles, calls her a little rascal, and gets right back to work, determined to finish the entire batch. The next morning, Johwi completes his very first prototype. He calls his father out to show him how to use this strange new device. His father looks at the wooden stick with animal hair on it like it's an alien object, completely confused. Johwi puts his own toothbrush in his mouth and says, "Please try to follow after me." His father mimics his movements, puts the brush in his mouth and starts scrubbing his teeth carefully. He scrubs up and down, side to side, and then takes a cup of water to rinse everything out. The moment he spits out the water, his father stops completely. His face freezes, his eyes widen in pure shock, and he lets out a massive, dramatic shout of pure joy. He feels an unbelievable sensation of freshness that he has never experienced in his entire life. His mouth feels incredibly clean, the nasty taste is gone, and his breath is perfectly fresh. The father is completely blown away by this simple invention. He turns to his son, his face lit up with excitement, and shouts, "Oh, what is this freshness?" Johwi smiles proudly, holds up his own brush, and says, "It's called a toothbrush. I invented it myself." And right there, seeing his dad's mind completely blown, a massive light bulb goes off in the father's head. He looks at the basket of extra toothbrushes, grins widely, and says, "Wait a minute, we could probably sell this to the public, right?" Johwi's eyes gleam, and he replies that based on how amazing his father's reaction was, this product is absolutely going to hit a massive jackpot in the city. And just like that, instead of focusing on blacksmithing, their brand new family business officially begins. They waste absolutely no time. They pack every single handmade toothbrush into a wooden crate, and his father yells, "Let's hurry to the market, my son." Johwi and his father step up and start loudly pitching the product to the crowd. They explain the concept of dental hygiene in simple terms, how it wipes away bad breath, keeps your teeth clean, prevents decay, and how incredibly easy it is to use every single morning. A massive crowd forms around their stall, completely surrounding them. People start waving their hands and throwing money, shouting, "I want one too, give me 2 of them." The family cannot believe their eyes. It is an absolute, undeniable jackpot. For the first time in months, real money is flowing into their hands. The panels show the father and son literally cheering and jumping in the air out of pure joy. In just 2 short hours, they managed to sell a whopping 250 toothbrushes. Since they priced each individual toothbrush at 2 iron coins, they made a grand total of 500 iron coins in a single afternoon, which is the exact equivalent of 5 shining silver coins. 5 silver coins in just 2 hours. The father is practically crying with happiness. He grabs Jowi's shoulders and says, "My son, the materials to make this are just free fur, cheap wood, and basic adhesive, right? Let's hurry up and buy ingredients in bulk so we can make even more." They run back home, burst through the door, and excitedly explain the brilliant business idea to the rest of the family. Hearing the incredible news that they can actually clear their debt, their mother, Goa Young, takes full command of the house. She gets everyone organized, and the entire family stays up all night long, working like a machine to manufacture toothbrushes in bulk. Their ultimate target is to create a massive batch of 3,000 toothbrushes. Johwi sits down and calculates the numbers. If they manage to sell all 3,000 pieces and increase the market price just a little bit, then after subtracting the minor cost of raw materials, the family will walk away with a net profit of 80 silver coins. That is more than enough to pay off the loan sharks and completely save their lives. The comic skips forward another half a month. The family has successfully worked themselves to the bone and crafted the massive inventory. Johwi and his father strap the heavy wooden crates onto their backs and confidently march back into the grand city market, ready to collect their wealth and clear their debt. But as the saying goes, the Murim world is a brutal place, and reality hits them right in the face. The very moment they step into the market square, the father's face completely drops. He breaks out into a cold, terrified sweat, his eyes wide with horror as he gasps, "How could this happen?" Johwi looks over at the central market stalls, and his jaw drops. It turns out that good ideas do not stay yours for long in a world with zero regulations. Other greedy local merchants immediately noticed the Zhou family's massive success 2 weeks ago, and they didn't waste any time. A massive, powerful merchant group known as the Manhwa Association has completely stepped in and plagiarized Johwi's invention. They mass-produced thousands of copycat toothbrushes and completely flooded the market before the Zhou family could even set up their stall. To make matters worse, because the Manhwa Association has huge factories, they are selling their stolen versions at a drastically lower price. Just one single iron coin per brush. They even innovated on his design, introducing smaller, cute toothbrushes painted pink specifically for children, and telling customers it's perfect for their wives or daughters. The market is completely captured by the corporate copycats, and the Zhou family's hopes are shattered in an instant. Johwi holds his face in his hands in absolute despair, muttering to himself, "Intellectual property rights, they don't exist in this era. There are no commercial patents, no copyright laws, and no legal courts to protect an inventor." He realizes a harsh lesson. This new world isn't just dangerous because of crazy martial artists with swords. The businessmen and merchants here fight just as dirty, and they will completely ruin you without a second thought. His father stands next to him, looking completely broken and defeated all over again, tears practically forming in his eyes as he turns to his son and asks, "Son, what should we do now?" The brief window of opportunity they thought they had to make a fortune has completely slammed shut. And then the darkest reality of all settles over them. The script ends on a high-tension note as Johwi looks at his father in pure, unadulterated panic. He shouts internally because he remembers the calendar. There are now only 15 days left before the ruthless loan shark's final deadline is up. Their brilliant business is ruined, they have boxes of unsold inventory, they have zero profit, and the deadly debt collectors are still marching right toward their front door. With that pressure hanging over them, Johwi standing completely alone, staring blankly as he tries to think of a way out of this financial nightmare. He knows that simply selling handmade household items won't be enough to clear a massive debt of 60 silver coins in 2 weeks. He needs something bigger, something revolutionary. Naturally, his modern mind starts drifting toward the greatest inventions of human history. First, he thinks about electricity. If he could introduce electricity to the ancient Central Plains, he would instantly become the wealthiest and most powerful man in the province. But almost immediately, reality hits him. He stares at his hands and realizes a massive problem. He has absolutely no idea how electricity actually works. Like most people in the 21st century, he used light bulbs and smartphones every single day. But he never actually learned how to build a power plant or generate a current from scratch. Giving up on that, he thinks, okay, how about a steam engine? It changed the modern world, so surely it can work here. But once again, the exact same problem stops him in his tracks. Even if he somehow spent months figuring out the exact mechanical schematics to build a functioning steam engine, this era doesn't have railroads, trains, or any supporting infrastructure. The entire idea falls apart before it even begins. Desperate, he shifts his thoughts to weapons. What if I make a gun? Gunpowder and firearms would completely shatter the power balance of the martial arts world, but he immediately pinches his nose in frustration. In his past life, he only ever shot a gun a couple of times during his mandatory military service. Knowing that a gun exists and actually knowing the chemical formulas for gunpowder and the engineering required to forge a firing mechanism are two completely different things. At this point, Johwi gets incredibly annoyed with his own limitations. He grumbles to himself about how in all those popular transmigration web novels, the main character magically knows how to reinvent advanced technology, build factories, and restructure civilization overnight. Meanwhile, here he is, a real-life transmigrator, and he can't even figure out a basic mechanical layout. While he is lost in his frustrating thoughts, his younger sister Yon walks outside into the courtyard. She looks at him and asks a very simple, innocent question, "Brother, do we have any water left?" Without even breaking his train of thought, Johwi looks at her and bluntly says, "Don't wash your hair today." Yon's face immediately drops into an annoyed pout. She stomps her foot and says, "Ah, really, you told me not to wash my hair yesterday as well." Johwi doesn't even blink. He calmly looks back at her and says, "Wash it the day after tomorrow." Yon looks completely baffled by his ridiculous logic and yells, what are you even saying?" But Johwi isn't just being a mean older brother. He is looking at the household from a perspective of pure efficiency. He explains the harsh reality to her, pointing out that fetching water in this area is a grueling task. It takes a worker nearly 2 full hours just to walk down to the source, fill up the buckets, and lug them back to the house. Right now, with a deadly debt deadline looming over them, every single bit of time and physical labor matters. He looks at her and casually finishes with, "If you don't like it, then go get the water yourself." Right around this time, their older brother, Jo Hyuk, walks out into the yard. He is sweating, breathing heavily, and wearing a bright, refreshed smile. He greets his siblings cheerfully, saying, "Yo, today is another refreshing morning. Have my little siblings slept well?" Johwi looks at his brother's carefree, happy face and feels an instant headache coming on. The family is drowning in debt. Ruthless loan sharks are preparing to butcher them in 15 days, and yet this guy is completely unfazed, spending his entire morning wildly swinging a sword in the yard. Honestly, the older brother doesn't seem to have a single care in the world, completely detached from the financial ruin staring them in the face. Seeing the two brothers standing together, the younger sister Yon suddenly looks back and forth between them. She leans closer to the older brother and whispers something very interesting. "Hey, don't you think our second brother has completely changed lately?" The older brother blinks, looking totally confused. As expected from a dense martial arts fanatic, he has absolutely no clue what she is talking about. Yon rolls her eyes and reminds him about the toothbrush incident from 2 weeks ago. She points out that when Johwi was gathering the materials and figuring out the production, he calculated the entire business plan, costs, and numbers almost instantly. It took him less time to figure out the math than it takes to drink a simple cup of hot tea. For a guy who used to be a quiet, useless bookworm, that speed was definitely not normal. Hearing this, even the dense older brother admits that it felt incredibly strange. He says that the way Johwi was shouting out numbers looked exactly like the rapid-fire calculations advanced merchants use in the big city markets. He looks over at Johwi suspiciously and asks, "Has our little bookworm suddenly started practicing arithmetic behind our backs?" Listening to his siblings whisper about him, Johwi stands there completely shocked. He realizes that from his own perspective, he wasn't doing anything special or magical at all. He was just using basic, elementary school multiplication to calculate the toothbrush inventory. It is something every single child in the modern world learns before they hit 10 years old. But suddenly, a massive realization hits him like a lightning bolt. He looks at his siblings' amazed faces and thinks, wait a minute. Do people in this era genuinely not know how to do basic multiplication? In ancient times, regular citizens and even common merchants relied on slow, tedious counting methods or primitive abacuses. Rapid mental math was a rarity. Johwi's entire worldview shifts in an instant. He realizes that knowing the 4 fundamental arithmetic operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, isn't just basic trivia here. In the ancient Murim world, having a 21st-century mathematical mind is an absolute superpower. Meanwhile, Yon keeps going down the list of all the weird ways her brother has changed. She tells Jo Hyuk that Johwi has become way better at talking. He constantly uses highly structured sentences, and he just sounds entirely too smart. Hearing his little sister summarize his condition makes Johwi laugh internally. From his perspective, he is just speaking normally. But he forgets that his brain holds the combined memories of his modern self, a man who spent nearly 20 years inside an advanced educational system. He went through elementary, middle, and high school, acquired college-level knowledge, and spent 7 brutal years memorizing dense legal and historical texts for the civil service exam. On top of that, he grew up in the digital information age, where data travels across the planet in seconds through smartphones and the internet. Yet, all of that massive, world-spanning experience gets hilariously summarized by his little sister into a single sentence. "You're just really good at talking now." This realization completely changes his approach. Johwi grabs a wooden stick from the yard, kneels down, and starts drawing rapid characters and diagrams in the dirt. His brother and sister lean over his shoulders, looking completely bewildered. They can't even recognize half the modern shorthand characters he is scribbling into the ground. Johwi writes something and stares at it and crosses it out and writes another one. He completely tunes out the world, analyzing his situation from every possible angle. And eventually, he discovers his true advantage. The thing this ancient world lacks the most isn't advanced technology like steam engines or electricity. What it truly lacks is modern conceptual knowledge, specifically, the science of economics. Basic principles that are considered completely normal in the modern world are virtually non-existent here. Concepts like supply and demand curves, extreme workforce efficiency, corporate contracts, market penetration theories, and systematic business management. Entire modern empires are built on these basic ideas. Johwi looks down at his dirt diagrams and smiles. He realizes that this economic knowledge inside his head is worth far more than 1,000,000 toothbrushes. He finally has a real weapon to fight back. Filled with a sudden burst of confidence, Johwi drops the stick, spins around, and marches straight into the family's iron workshop. Inside, the heavy sound of a hammer hitting metal echoes through the room. His father, Jo Soon, is drenched in sweat, working tirelessly at the anvil to forge basic tools. Johwi walks right up to the hot forge, stands firmly, and drops an absolute bombshell of a sentence. "Father, please pass this entire workshop down to me." The hammering stops instantly. The silence in the room is deafening. His father slowly lowers his heavy hammer, turns around with a look of pure disbelief, and barks, "What kind of absolute nonsense are you talking about?" Johwi doesn't back down. He stands his ground and tries to explain that he has a brilliant new business strategy to save the family. But his father immediately cuts him off, refusing to hear another word. To an ancient, traditional craftsman like Jo Soon, this workshop isn't just a place to make a quick buck. It represents his life's work, his family heritage, his pride, and his very soul. He looks at his son with deep disappointment and says, "You don't understand. You don't possess the true soul of a craftsman." But Johwi isn't trying to be a craftsman. He is trying to survive. He completely ignores the emotional argument and asks a sharp, cold question. "Father, tell me, how much more silver can we possibly borrow right now?" This question completely shocks his father, turning his disappointment into pure disbelief. The family is already buried under a life-threatening debt of 60 silver coins with a brutal loan shark, and now his bookworm son walks in and casually asks to borrow even more money. Before his father can even yell, Johwi starts pointing at the tools in the shop and calculating out loud like a cold corporate accountant. He looks at the heavy iron block and says, "The anvil is high quality, it's worth at least 50 silver coins. The rest of the specialized smelting tools are worth around 30 silver. If we count the physical property value of the workshop itself, we have solid assets. If we put everything we own up as collateral, we can easily secure a brand new loan of around 300 silver coins." Hearing his son talk about betting the entire family's future on a gamble makes his father's blood boil with fury. From his perspective, Johwi is talking like an insane, reckless gambler who wants to risk their home, their livelihood, and the safety of his mother and sister. But Johwi remains completely calm under his father's intense rage. He looks his father dead in the eye and asks a crucial question. "Father, if we desperately needed to borrow money to survive, why on earth did you go to a shady, dangerous loan shark in the first place?" His father freezes, completely caught off guard. Johwi continues pressing his advantage, saying, "If you are going to take out a financial loan, you have to do it properly. You should have approached the major established merchant groups instead. For example, the Fire Dragon Merchant Group is famous throughout the region for dealing with independent craftsmen fairly. Why didn't you even consider them?" At this point, the father is completely stunned. The anger drains out of him, replaced by utter confusion. This does not sound like the quiet Johwi, who used to hide in his room reading history books all day long. For a brief moment, the father wonders if his son's recent near-death illness did something to his mind. Has this kid always been this incredibly bold? But then a memory flashes in the father's head: the toothbrush. Nobody in the family believed in the weird wooden stick with boar hair either, yet Johwi's crazy idea actually generated real silver coins in a matter of hours. Could it be that his son genuinely sees a path to victory that nobody else can see? The father lets out a long, heavy sigh. He knows that out of everyone in the household, Johwi treasures his mother and little sister more than anyone else. He wouldn't recklessly risk their lives on a foolish whim. He relaxes his posture, looks at his son seriously, and asks, Do you actually have a concrete plan?" Johwi smiles confidently and answers, "Yes, I do." Then he delivers a statement so outrageously ambitious that it leaves his father completely speechless. I don't just want to clear our debt, father. I want to build the absolute greatest iron workshop in the entire Anhui region. I am going to establish the Zhou clan's iron kingdom across the entire province. His father almost falls over. The workshop is literally on the verge of bankruptcy. They can barely afford to eat without debt, and this kid is standing here calmly talking about building a commercial iron kingdom. He looks at Johwi like he has completely lost his mind and points out the immediate glaring flaw in his dream. Are you insane? Have you forgotten about the raw materials? Iron ore is incredibly expensive right now, and the local general controls the entire trade. How exactly do you plan to solve that? But Johwi is 3 steps ahead. He explains that their traditional method of manufacturing is completely outdated. Instead of wasting grueling days buying raw, unrefined iron ore and spending countless hours smelting and purifying it themselves, they should skip that entire process. They should use their new capital to buy pre-refined iron ingots directly from the larger suppliers. His father scoffs, asking if his son even knows how much a pre-refined iron ingot costs on the open market. Without a second of hesitation, Johwi rattles off the exact current market price. It sits at exactly 3 silver coins. This instant, accurate answer completely stuns the father all over again. It proves that Johwi wasn't just daydreaming. He has actually been quietly doing intensive market research behind their backs. Johwi then lays out the core strategy. He notes that the workshop's biggest, most reliable seller has always been standard iron plows for farming. The local farmers constantly need them, meaning a massive guaranteed market demand is already sitting right outside their door. Instead of wasting time trying to invent fancy, complicated new weapons or items, they need to focus 100% of their energy on mass-producing their best-selling item. And then comes the shocking part of the pitch. Johwi looks at his dad and says, "And to completely take over the market, we are going to slash our retail price by 30%. The father nearly jumps out of his boots, yelling, "What? Are you out of your mind? You want to take a standard 40 silver iron plow and sell it for only 28 silver coins? We will ruin ourselves." To an old-school craftsman, this sounds like financial suicide. Forging a single iron plow by hand takes nearly half a month of exhausting non-stop labor. How could they possibly lower the price that much and make a profit? But Johwi points out the traditional flaw in his father's mindset. He explains that by buying pre-refined iron ingots, they eliminate the most exhausting and time-consuming part of the workflow. According to his systematic calculations, skipping the purification stage means a single plow can be fully manufactured in just 4 days instead of 15. His father is still highly skeptical. He argues that even if production becomes faster, a single craftsman still only has 2 hands. They would have to work themselves to death to make enough volume, and with a lower price tag, the profit margin on each plow becomes way smaller. What is the actual point of all that extra stress? Johwi just lets out a slow sigh. His father is still trapped in the old-world mentality of an independent craftsman who does everything alone. Johwi steps closer, smiles, and drops the ultimate economic game-changer. "Father, whoever said that you have to do all the work yourself?" The entire workshop falls into a stunned silence. That single sentence completely changes the nature of the conversation. Johwi begins explaining the revolutionary modern concept of the division of labor. He explains that instead of having one master blacksmith labor over a single plow from start to finish, they will hire a team of local workers. He breaks down the production line perfectly. They will hire specialized workers like stokers to manage the intense heat, molders to shape the molten metal, and finishers to handle the final details. Each group will handle only one specific, repetitive step of the process. By dividing the labor, the speed of production will skyrocket to unprecedented levels. He even introduces the concept of work shifts, explaining that the workers will rotate in groups so the workshop can keep running for longer hours without exhausting a single soul. He lays out the entire mathematical blueprint, the exact cost of hiring the workers, the daily operating expenses, the massive volume of plows they will output, and the huge net profit they will pull in. His father listens in absolute silence. For the first time since the conversation began, he has completely stopped arguing. He is looking at his son with a newfound sense of respect and awe. Every single number Johwi states has flawless logic behind it, and every step has a clear commercial purpose. He finally realizes a profound truth. His son isn't just dreaming a wild, childish dream. He is looking at a future business genius who is about to turn the entire region upside down. And with that realization settling in, the story moves into a harsh reality. As Johwi and his father walk toward the bustling marketplace where the major merchant syndicates operate, he is physically feeling the grind literally. He realizes his heels are absolutely killing him and grumbles to himself that he desperately needs to buy a new pair of shoes before he starts making real money. As they approach the grand, imposing headquarters of the formidable Fire Dragon Merchant Group, Johwi spots a man outside directing the crowd. The man barks at them, "You're the young master's third customer. Please go over there to wait for your turn." Johwi watches this closely and recognizes that the man is a sharp, highly observant gatekeeper for the syndicate. The atmosphere is incredibly tense. He and his father stand in line, watching a parade of local business owners and craftsmen exit the building. Almost none of them leave with a good expression. Most look completely defeated, sighing heavily as they walk away. It's a stark reminder that Murim commerce is a brutal, unforgiving battlefield. Johwi notes to himself that this negotiation is definitely not going to be easy. When the guard finally shouts, "Next," Johwi turns to his anxious father and calmly says, "Father, you can just stay here." Leaving his father in the courtyard, and he takes a deep breath and steps through the doors completely alone. Johwi enters a luxurious, quiet room and finds himself standing before a smooth, wealthy-looking young man sitting behind a large desk, flanked by an imposing personal guard. In his mind, he instantly notes the striking resemblance to Li Jiangyi. The young master of the merchant group looks up, completely unimpressed by Wei's plain clothes, and bluntly asks, "All right, how many silvers do you need?" Johwi doesn't hesitate for a single second. He looks him dead in the eye and says, "I need 300 silvers." The room goes dead silent. The young master doesn't even bother to ask why. He just raises a dismissive hand to his guard and says, "See him out." Most people would panic, beg, or leave in shame, but Johwi just smiles. As he turns to go, he throws out a cold, calculated warning, "You'll be regretting this while pounding the floor. This will perhaps be the biggest mistake you'll ever make in your life." The young master pauses, his brow furrowing. "What did you say?" Our MC turns back with total confidence and declares that by kicking him out, the Fire Dragon Merchant Group is actively throwing away an exclusive connection to the workshop that will soon supply the absolute majority of ironwork materials in Manhwa, and the one that will charge the cheapest delivery fees. Intrigued but highly skeptical, the young master asks if Johwi is a representative from one of the massive, established names like the Golden Hill Workshop or the Great Black Fire Workshop. Our MC boldly replies, "I'm Johwi, the second son of the Zhou clan's workshop in Bangte. Of course, I'm here on behalf of the Zhou clan's workshop." The young master's face immediately darkens. He slams his hand down, feeling insulted. "Did you come out here to mess with me? Are you looking down on the name of the Fire Dragon Merchant Group?" Johwi lets out a calm sigh, perfectly maintaining his composure. He admits he knows his family's name currently holds zero fame, which is exactly why he isn't asking for a credit transaction based on trust. Instead, he lays down a hyper-detailed asset collateral sheet that leaves the young master completely stunned. Johwi begins rattling off numbers like a human calculator. 300 steel anvils worth about 50 silver coins. 2 big hammers, 2 small hammers, and 3 steel blades. 6 cast iron frames, bringing the total tool market price to 40 silver coins. The workshop's physical plot of land, 220 pyong, valued at 40 silver coins. Their raw storage materials, like oak tree bark and charcoal, which would sell for 10 silver coins. All of that, Johwi concludes smoothly, brings a total of 150 silvers. These are everything that we'll be putting up as collateral. The young master narrows his eyes, doing the quick math. What about the remaining 150 silvers? Our MC looks at him completely expressionless and drops an absolute bombshell. "My father is in his late 30s while my mother is in her mid-30s. My older brother and I are in our 20s. I'll put up all 4 of our lives as collateral." The young master is genuinely shocked. Johwi calmly explains the grim logistics. He points out that it is hard to figure out the usual cost of human trafficking on the illegal market. If they base the valuation off the official trading prices of government slaves, the combined net worth of 4 healthy, prime-aged individuals easily exceeds 150 silver coins. The young master stares at Johwi, realizes this kid isn't bluffing or crazy, and smiles. He finds RMC incredibly interesting and admits the logic is completely sound. However, he notes that handling and liquidating collateral takes significant time, manpower, and overhead fees, especially when dealing with future slavery. That's why, Johwi says, "I'm giving you an opportunity to make a deal with me instead." Wei smiles inwardly. The tables have officially turned. The young master asks, "For what reason would having a connection with your workshop be an opportunity to the Fire Dragon Merchant Group?" He lays down his master plan. He promises to supply the Fire Dragon Merchant Group with high-quality iron plows at a mind-boggling 70% of the standard market price. The young master literally gaps out loud, his eyes widening in complete disbelief. How could a large iron plow be worth a measly 28 silvers? Can you really supply goods with these prices? Our MC confidently replies that he is ready to sign a binding contract right now. To seal the deal and apply ultimate pressure, he casually mentions that if the Fire Dragon Merchant Group decides to pass on this offer, he plans on walking straight over to their bitter rivals, the Milky White Merchant Group, with the exact same offer. The young master's pride flares up. Realizing Johwi is aggressively playing him against his rivals, he refuses to lose out on this goldmine. He turns to his imposing guard and commands, General Ha, bring out 1,000 silvers. The guard is completely thrown off. The young master looks at Johwi with a dangerous, predatory grin. Since he brought up the grim reality of the black market, the young master decides to play by those exact rules. By giving him 1,000 silvers instead of 300, he is effectively buying absolute literal power over the entire family's lives. He warns Johwi that if the workshop fails to pay him back in time, he will sell them off as slaves or prostitutes without a single shred of mercy. Johwi doesn't even flinch, he just smiles and says that won't happen. Walking out of the headquarters with a massive chest of 1,000 silver coins, his father is shaking, completely overwhelmed. He anxiously asks, "Son, what will we do now?" Johwi turns to him and asks a simple question, "Father, what is most common in this time period?" His father looks confused. "Most common," Johwi grins. "It's none other than manpower." The moment they return to their home district of Bangtai, he immediately posts massive for-hire signs right at the entrance of the crowded marketplace, and his calculation pays off instantly. The next morning, a massive, roaring sea of people completely packs their courtyard. His father looks out at the crowd, his jaw hitting the floor. "I can't believe that this many people gathered here." Johwi sits in a chair like a seasoned modern HR manager and begins a strict, highly calculated one-by-one interview process, utilizing his business administration degree and years of working random part-time jobs. He ruthlessly filters the candidates into 3 band categories. The overly talkative is automatically rejected. Johwi notes that people who talk too much are rarely honest and are highly likely to incite drama, gossip, and division within a strict workforce environment. The physically weak also gets rejected as they simply won't survive the grueling, non-stop physical labor of a heavy iron workshop. The slow-witted are also rejected. MC explains that naive or slow-witted individuals will completely disrupt the highly optimized, rapid workflow speed he is trying to establish. Once his elite team is selected, Johwi stands before the crowd of newly hired workers and officially welcomes them to the Zhou clan's workshop. He passes out beautifully structured, written legal contracts, telling those who can read to check the terms immediately and encouraging those who can't to find a literate friend to verify the contents for them. The workers flip through the pages, murmuring in confusion. Johwi steps forward and begins laying down the modern, capitalistic bonus structures that are completely unheard of in this medieval era. The base salary and overtime. He sets the base daily salary for charcoal burners at a solid 8 iron coins. But then he introduces an alien concept, overtime pay. If they work extra hours, they will receive an additional 2 iron coins per hour. The workers gasp, wildly calculating that their salaries will skyrocket just by putting in a few extra hours. Weekly paid leave. Johwi announces that everyone is required to completely rest once every 7 days. The workers are baffled, but our MC drops a second bombshell, holiday pay. They will be paid 70% of their daily salary, that is 7 iron coins, just to stay home and rest. The workers literally lose their minds, yelling, "We can rest for a day. Holiday pay? You'll still give us iron coins even if we don't work." Johwi smoothly explains that resting is a scientific necessity to maintain their peak physical strength so they can work twice as hard the next day. Performance bonuses. He tells them it's too early to be surprised. He introduces performance pay if a charcoal burner outputs more than 30 du, which is around 540 liters of charcoal in a single day, they get an instant 50% raise, bringing their daily earnings to a whopping 12 iron coins. Monthly and annual leave. On top of everything else, he grants them 1 extra monthly leave day. If they choose to skip it and work instead, their pay for that day is completely doubled. Furthermore, if anyone works a full consecutive year without taking unexcused absences, they are rewarded with an additional 5-day paid annual leave the following year, which also pays double if they choose to work through it. Johwi watches their ecstatic faces and laughs internally, noting that the modern bonus system is a beautiful, hyper-efficient capitalistic gift perfected through centuries of trial and error. He confirms that these identical, ultra-lucrative contract terms apply to every single sector of the factory, the molders, the stokers, and the forgers alike. However, his friendly smile instantly vanishes as he delivers one non-negotiable, deadly serious condition: the non-disclosure agreement. He looks at the crowd with cold eyes and warns them that they are strictly forbidden from disclosing a single piece of operational data, workflow design, or workshop business to anyone outside, not even to their closest family members. Because they have a massive workforce, he warns them that any leak will be instantly tracked down through internal investigation, and the offender will be unconditionally fired on the spot. The workers, completely intoxicated by the thought of earning life-changing wealth, pump their fists into the air and scream at the top of their lungs, "We absolutely won't tell anyone. Please don't worry about it and let us work immediately. We want to start working. Nowhere else pays this much money." Johwi raises his hands to calm the roaring crowd and smiles. "You can't just yet. Only the charcoal burners are to follow me. The rest would have to be trained by my father over there. You don't have to worry about your salary. You'll be paid even if you're only receiving training." The entire workforce cheers in pure euphoria, shouting that they will gladly work themselves to death for the Zhou clan's workshop. Their excitement carries straight into the next stretch of the story, where we step into the roaring, chaotic forge of the Zhou clan's workshop. The entire facility is a symphony of rhythmic clanging and hammering echoing off the walls. But while Johwi is playing the good cop, his father is playing the ultimate traditional Murim bad cop. The old craftsman is stalking through the heat, throwing absolute tantrums at the new recruits. When one exhausted worker tries to instinctively flinch away from a blast of heat, the father screams right in his face. "You can't just look away because the fire is hot. Feel the heat with your whole body." Talk about an intense workplace safety seminar. He then rounds on another terrified rookie who is swinging his hammer like a madman, barking, "You're just ignorantly hitting that so it makes a lot of noise. The strength of your hammering can't vary. Hit the areas accurately with the same amount of strength." The worker frantically screams back, "I'll work hard," while praying he doesn't get turned into a casting mold himself. Meanwhile, a bright recruit shows some initiative by suggesting they omit a complex handle from a casting mold to save time, pointing out they can easily attach a cheap lumber handle afterward. The father loves the shortcut, praising him for learning beyond his teachings, which prompts the worker to blush and scratch his head happily. Johwi watches his father bossing everyone around and jokes to himself, "That status truly makes a person." He approaches the old man and asks for a quick status update, suggesting it's finally time to kick full-scale production into gear. His father immediately scoffs, crossing his arms. "Humph, impossible. What can they produce with those skills? The quality of Zhou clan's products isn't something easily attained." Johwi tries to introduce a concept that gives every traditional perfectionist a heart attack: minimum viable product. He tells his dad that it's completely fine if the items only hit 70% of their original master quality. His father's eyes practically bug out of his head. 70%? No way, those men can't even reach 50% with their skills. This is where Johwi drops some cold, hard 21st century reality on him. He pulls his dad aside and whispers a terrifying financial breakdown. They've already been training these rookies for 20 days. Between paying off the ruthless loan sharks, buying massive bulk ingots of iron, and covering the high food and living expenses for this army of workers, their 1,000 silvers are evaporating. "Our silvers can only last for 10 days, Johwi warns, his face completely pale. "We'll seriously go under. We must really decide now." Realizing their literal lives are on the line, the father holds up 3 fingers and begs for a final deadline. 3 days. Just give me 3 more days. I'll at least have them imitate a craftsman within that time frame. Johwi sighs and reluctantly agrees, warning him that this is officially their last extension. Cut to 3 days later, and the workshop undergoes a miraculous transformation. Thanks to the father's brutal bootcamp and Johwi's hyper-optimized divided assembly line, the workers become a terrifyingly efficient corporate machine. Charcoal burners burn, stokers stoke, molders mold, and forgers forge in perfect harmony. By breaking the manufacturing process down into simple, repeatable steps, the results are absolutely staggering. In a single day, the workshop pumps out 22 giant iron plows. In less than 4 days, they hit 100 pieces. Johwi picks up a freshly minted plow, marveling at how solid it looks. But behind him, his father is staring at the mountain of rapidly produced inventory, suffering a massive existential crisis. The old man falls to his knees, tears streaming down his face as lightning practically strikes in the background. His father says, "Give me back 40 years of my life. You should have told me earlier if you knew about this. I've been doing this alone all my life. It used to take me 4 days just to make one giant iron plow." Johwi just chuckles and hits him with the classic IT manager response. "It's not too late to kick it off. You could start now." His father just buries his face in his hands, weeping about his broken back while Johwi awkwardly tries to comfort him. Flash forward half a year later. The assembly line has been running non-stop and business is absolutely booming. How do we know? Because Johwi is sitting in a lavish office, humming a happy little tune while sliding his feet into a premium pair of high-end, custom-made leather boots. He wiggles his toes and thinks to himself, well, this is quite comparable to an Air Max. Now that is what you call a proper 21st century capitalist flex in the middle of ancient Murim. While Wee is busy enjoying his sneakerhead moment, his sharp new manager, Lee Yosong, enters the room to deliver the daily corporate reports. To keep up with their explosive growth, Johwi has officially restructured the Zhou clan's workshop into 3 highly specialized corporate divisions to maximize their efficiency. First up, we have the Decent Building. This division consists of the original veteran members of the workshop. They are the heavy hitters responsible for manufacturing massive iron goods, things like large iron plows, security doors, and structural columns. Unsurprisingly, they are the undisputed top performers of the company, consistently bringing in the highest numbers and attracting the most sponsors. Next is the Sawson Building, which is basically the rookie training ground. This division is made up entirely of the new recruits. They handle the production of smaller everyday farming equipment like shovels, sickles, hoes, pitchforks, and iron cores. Unfortunately for them, Manager Lee notes that their performance is currently a bit inadequate, as both their skill levels and overall worker tenacity are lagging behind the veterans. Finally, Johwi introduces his pride and joy, the Jison Building. This is the newly established tech-intensive research and development hub of the company. Instead of basic tools, this elite division focuses on high-margin, complex engineering products like high-security safes, intricate padlocks, commercial carriages, iron wheels, and stirrups. Wee reviews the data, taps his desk, and looks over at his manager. He tells Manager Lee to bear these numbers in mind, but to specifically go down to the factory floor and give the struggling workers at the Sawson Building a bit more encouragement to boost their drive and light a fire under them. Just as they finish up, Manager Lee mentions that a very special guest has been patiently waiting in the guest house for the past 2 hours for Johwi to finish his shift. It's none other than the young master of the Fire Dragon Merchant Group, whom our MC affectionately calls Bai Hyunam, or as we know him, the Lee Jiangyi lookalike. Wee bolts out of his chair, scolding Lee for not telling him sooner, and runs to greet his business partner. They two sit down for tea, immediately trading friendly jabs. Johwi teases him about their legendary drinking session 3 days prior, claiming he still feels nauseous from the Maodai liquor, while the young master aggressively insists he only lost the drinking game because the pub's specific alcohol didn't sit well with him, swearing he'll win the next match. Johwi casually asking if he brought the promised funds. The young master scoffs, calling out Wee's weird habit of calling him Jiangyi Hyunam. He demands, "Who the hell is Jiangyi?" Johwi just smiles mysteriously, snacking on food, and replies he's just someone. But the playful banter quickly turns dead serious. The young master warns Johwi that the sheer volume of cheap, high-quality Zhou clan iron flooding the market over the last 6 months has become impossible to hide. They are moving hundreds of supply carts across Anhui every single month. Unless they're a fool, there's no way people wouldn't know, the young master warns grimly. He explains that local blacksmiths and rival merchants have been united in protesting outside the Fire Dragon headquarters for a month, and it won't be long before they swarm the Zhou clan workshop directly to protect their livelihoods. Even worse, corrupt government officials are like wild dogs, and if they storm the gates to investigate where Johwi is sourcing his massive lumps of raw iron, the entire cornerstone of the workshop could disappear. Johwi isn't rattled at all. He calmly pulls out his signature leather ledger, prompting the young master to mentally scream. He took out his book again. Johwi drops a casual bombshell. "How much net revenue do you think I gained in a month from operating Zhou clan's workshop? 600 silvers. Essentially 60 gold. The young master's jaw hits the floor. Even within his massive established merchant group, very few individual branches pull in that kind of insane monthly net profit. Our MC then flashes a cold, predatory grin. He explains that he isn't a single bit afraid of the government officials because he has already been systematically and periodically bribing every single one of them to keep their mouths shut. As far as the Empire's law is concerned, the issue is completely settled through cold, hard cash. But then the atmosphere in the room completely shifts from corporate greed to absolute Murim dread. Johwi looks at the young master with deadly serious eyes. The officials aren't the real problem. The people he is truly terrified of are the ones who intend to devour the Zhou clan's workshop, the ruthless, lawless monsters of the Jianghu. The story takes a dark turn here as we get an epic look at the true nature of the Murim world. Johwi explains that there are factions out there like the Iron Blood Group, vicious wild dogs who will go to horrifying lengths to achieve their interests. These are people who exist entirely free from the constraints of imperial law. Individuals who can precisely point out their enemies while distinguishing perfectly between gratitude and resentment. If a lawless group like that finds out a small, defenseless family workshop is printing 60 gold coins a month, they will slaughter the Zhou family. The young master anxiously nods along, realizing the danger. He advises Wei that the faster this iron supply issue is resolved, the better. He suggests that Wei's best bet is to try and directly follow Master Bang to secure a shield. But then he sighs, pointing out the harsh reality. He won't just sponsor a mere workshop. You'll have to find a connection with him as soon as possible. But Johwi just smiles mysteriously. Master Bang, a mere local powerhouse? Please. Johwi aims so high he's basically looking at the stars. He looks the young master dead in the eye and declares, "So now I've decided, I'll have the King of Anhui as my sponsor." The young master stares at him, completely paralyzed. "No way, are you?" he whispers, his face turning pale as paper. Johwi grins and confirms his absolute madman target, Namegong. Cue the ultimate lore drop. We are talking about the South Palace, the great Namegong clan. This isn't just any martial arts family. This is a legendary powerhouse filled with elite disciples descended from the clans of the imperial family's own generals. They are the heavenly great swordsmen, widely recognized as the absolute best in the entire world and the great sword of the Central Plains. The mere name of the dwelling of swordsmen strikes pure, unadulterated terror into the hearts of the wicked. The heads of the 5 great clans, alongside their master swordsmen, are perpetually seated on the upper echelons of the entire Jianghu hierarchy. They are untouchable, godlike figures who exist completely above the law. The young master is left trembling uncontrollably, his teeth chattering, and his face is completely drenched in a river of cold sweat. He looks at Johwi like he's looking at a lunatic who just suggested they go look for a pet dragon, and gasps out, "Brother, do you even think that's possible?" And just a few days earlier, before that big meeting ever took place, Johwi is wandering downtown in Anhui, Jiangbang Prefecture, when he runs straight into a massive, rowdy crowd gathered outside a local brothel. Naturally, a street fight is breaking out. 2 guys are going at it with swords, sparks flying, slicing up the air and looking incredibly flashy. Johwi's eyes light up. Coming from the modern world, he's absolutely mesmerized, muttering, "Wow, where are these warriors from?" An old bystander turns to him and immediately kills the hype. He explains that the guy swinging the machete is Ho Wangmun, a low-ranking military soldier just trying to make a name for himself, but he's not considered a true warrior at all. The other guy swinging a sword is Sa Jiomhi, a local outlaw who isn't even close to being a real warrior either. Johwi's jaw drops. "You're telling me that's not a warrior? If these terrifyingly fast sword swingers are just low-tier scrubs, how strong are the actual monsters of this world?" Suddenly, an actual martial master enters the chat. A mysterious man in blue casually steps between the 2 fighters and unleashes a massive wave of pure crushing energy. With a single glare, he commands, "You worm-like imbeciles, get lost, both of you." The 2 outlaws freeze up, break into a cold sweat, and instantly scurry away like bugs. Seeing this unbelievable display of real Murim power completely cements Johwi's resolve. He realizes that, if outlaws crawl out like insects the moment you blink, he absolutely needs a god-tier shield. This is the exact moment he decides to go completely all in on securing the ultimate powerhouse, the great Namegong clan. We snap back to the present meeting between Johwi and the young master. The young master is still hyperventilating over Johwi's plan to visit the Namgung clan's royal residence, pointing out how utterly insane it is. Our MC reminds him of how they first met. "To be honest, the only thing I could offer you at that time was my resolve, and even so you gave me the silvers." The young master laughs, completely charmed by his corporate audacity, and says, "If I could go back in time, I would have given you 10,000 silvers instead of 1,000. He warns Johwi to be careful, but reminds him that if the sponsorship actually works out, he better not forget about his favorite merchant group. As the young master prepares to leave, he tells Johwi to write to him immediately if anything goes wrong. No sooner does his guest leave than manager Lee walks in with a message. "Boss, the workshop's pioneer wishes to meet with you." His father had requested Johwi to come dressed in proper, formal attire. When Johwi arrives and sits down, his father walks in carrying a mysterious, ornate box. The old man sits solemnly in front of him, hands the box to Johwi. His father explains that this is a supernatural item belonging to their ancient patriarch, Jo Mingpiok. While its exact origins are shrouded in mystery, the ancestral will dictates that this item must be passed down to the representative clan member of each generation. And then Johwi opens the box. But the moment Johwi holds the box, his brain experiences a massive jolt of cosmic deja vu. He's stunned to see what's inside. It's the same jade crystal his father gave him in his past life. A memory flashes, his modern corporate father giving him this nearly identical crystal in the exact same manner right before his death. We panics internally, realizing a terrifying truth. If this is the family heirloom, does that mean I've entered the body of my own ancient ancestor? His father looks at him with immense pride and says, "No matter what anyone says, the one who brought our clan back to life was you. You are the perfect fit to carry on our new generation. My second son, Johwi, will become the chief of the clan and receive the Yuichin Crimson Jade." Before Johwi can process his existential ancestral crisis, the Crimson Jade literally starts glowing violently and talking out loud. Inside his head, ghostly voices begin arguing with each other. Voice 1 says, "Wait, this energy. This guy seems like a descendant who has already witnessed the Yuichin epic. Wouldn't you agree, grandfather?" Voice 2 says, "This is undoubtedly the energy of Yuichin. You're right, he must be. How can a Buddha's disciple exist in this present life?" Johwi completely loses his mind, leaping backward and screaming, "What the heck? The Crimson Jade can talk." His dad just blinks at him, completely oblivious to the cosmic voices, and casually says, "I too had a strange dream once after staring at the Crimson Jade for a long time. It isn't your average object, so always keep your heart prepared." The old man then just gets up and walks out, leaving his son alone with a box full of noisy ancestral ghosts. Once the dad leaves, the main spirit introduces himself as one of the ancient ancestors. He tells Johwi to relax. They only exist as spirits and have zero intent or ability to cause trouble in the physical world. However, the ghost notes something highly bizarre about Johwi's soul. Usually, whenever a descendant is chosen by the Crimson Jade, they receive a massive blessing known as a string. When their life ends, their spirit is pulled back via the string to join the Jade. But he doesn't have a string at all. The spirit assumes Johwi must have already received a cheat code tier blessing right out of the gate. He explains what the Crimson Jade usually grants depending on what the user desires. If you want martial arts mastery, you get a body capable of literally soaring through the skies. If you want wisdom, you receive a divine brain capable of mapping out the stars. If you want power, you get an emperor's mind that can captivate anyone under the heavens. Hearing this, Johwi gets incredibly pressed. He tells the rock, "In that case, I have never received the blessing. If I really had something like that, would I have gone through such a hard time trying to establish the Zhou clan's workshop?" The spirit gets furious at Johwi, roaring, "Insolence, do not lie, how else would you explain your spirit's energy?" Johwi freezes, realizing the truth. The blessing he received wasn't martial arts or supreme wisdom, it was his entire reincarnation. The Jade is the reason he transmigrated into ancient Johwi's body after dying in the modern world. He debates whether he should reveal his deepest, most terrifying secret to these ghosts. He nervously drops a hint, "To be honest, I had experienced a strange event. I have reincarnated." The moment the word drops, the ancestral spirit realm completely erupts into chaotic chatter. "Reincarnation? There's no way, how did you?" Suddenly, the head ancient ancestor bursts into a booming, manic, supervillain-style laughter that fills the room. "Ha ha ha, it seems that the heavens will not allow me to disobey them until the end. For the rest of eternity, I will merely remain as an immoral profiteer." The underlying spirits start cheering, "Sama, it's your victory." Before he can ask what on earth a Sama or an immortal profiteer means, the spirits abruptly vanish, leaving him sitting in total silence holding a very quiet rock. Johwi is left sweating, muttering, ancestors, and then he sigh, "What's with this unexpected event?" But there is absolutely no time for a spiritual identity crisis. Suddenly, the sliding doors of the office are violently slammed open with a loud thud. It's Johwi's older brother, looking absolutely terrified, his face pale and his eyes wide with pure panic. He is shaking like a leaf as he screams at the top of his lungs, "I'm going to the great Namgong clans." He's completely losing it over the sheer danger of dealing with the legendary sword family. But right then, Johwi shuts him down instantly, staring him dead in the eye, and delivering a blunt refusal. "No, you can't." His brother drops to his knees, clenching his hands together in a desperate prayer. He pleads with Johwi, promising that he is not trying to tag along for fun. He swears up and down that he will stay completely silent, act as a quiet assistant, and will not say a single word throughout the entire diplomatic mission. He just wants to see the legendary South Palace with his own eyes. Johwi tries to bribe him to stay behind, offering to ask their father to forge him a true, mastercrafted sword. For a split second, his brother's eyes pop out with excitement. But he quickly shakes his head, shouting that even if Johwi promises him 10 true swords, he will not be swayed. He continues begging at the top of his lungs. Right on cue, their father steps into the room and immediately takes the brother's side. The father points out that the older brother has promised to act like a loyal assistant and keep quiet. He tells Johwi that they are brothers, and Johwi should stop trying to shoulder every single burden and responsibility all by himself. Johwi sighs heavily. He looks at his brother and asks one final time if he is absolutely confident he will remain completely silent. His brother proudly pounds his chest, declaring that honesty is the very foundation of being a martial artist and that he is the literal definition of silence. Johwi finally relents, telling him they will depart in a few days, sending his brother into a joyful celebratory dance. The peaceful family moment is shattered when a workshop employee comes sprinting across the courtyard in a complete panic. He tells Johwi that there is a massive problem. A giant crowd of furious local workers has gathered outside the gates, and every single one of them is armed with weapons. Outside, the rival craftsmen and blacksmiths are rioting. They are waving shovels, hammers, and pitchforks, screaming that they want to take everything from the Zhou clan's workshop and destroy Johwi for printing cheap iron. Johwi calmly steps out to face the mob, introducing himself as the boss. The mob leader steps forward, pointing an angry finger, calling Johwi an immoral scammer who has broken the sacred moral codes of business. Johwi doesn't flinch. He casually steps forward and drops a cold question on the entire crowd. He asks them, if the Zhou clan's workshop lowers its manufacturing costs and still makes a healthy profit, would any of them honestly maintain their business morality and keep their own prices high out of respect? Or would they immediately drop their prices too? The crowd instantly goes dead silent. They know he is completely right. Most of the people standing there are owners of tiny, struggling individual workshops. Seeing them waver, Johwi gestures for them to follow him inside, telling them he is going to give them a personal tour of his factory floor. Johwi leads the angry mob right into the roaring heart of the assembly line. The rival blacksmiths look around and their jaws hit the floor. They see dozens of anvils clanging in perfect harmony. They look at the sheer scale of the operation, absolutely horrified, wondering how it is possible for all these men to be elite craftsmen. This is where Johwi delivers a masterclass in economic manipulation. He plays on their regional pride and their deep-seated resentment toward the rival Sichuan province. He asks the crowd how much longer they are going to live under intense financial pressure, confined to the background while Sichuan dominates the entire empire's weapon trade just because they happen to have more mines. He reminds them that for the last 100 years, the imperial family has never respected Anhui's legendary craftsmen. They only ever show up to drag their young men away to serve as battlefield soldiers. He rants that when it comes to pure unadulterated talent, Anhui's craftsmen are vastly superior. The crowd is completely hooked, shouting in agreement that the emperor is cruel and that Anhui has been mistreated for too long. Once he has them cheering, Johwi drops the ultimate business pitch. Please help me to achieve my dream. If Anhui is ever going to surpass Sichuan, we need to overtake them in terms of quantity. We need to fill up the heavens with iron machines. We cannot do this operating separate, individual workshops. We need to join forces. He points to his massive assembly line and tells the veteran elders that he wants to hire them to teach the new recruits. He promises that if they join him, they will never have to perform backbreaking, nasty workshop labor ever again. To seal the deal, Johwi calls his father over and introduces him as the workshop's pioneer. He then announces the corporate compensation package. Every single veteran elder who signs on will be promoted to a workshop pioneer, receiving a massive monthly salary of 10 silvers plus various bonus payments. On top of that, Johwi promises to buy out all of their current workshop inventory and tools for a very hefty price. With a grand theatrical gesture, Johwi whips off a large tarp to reveal a massive, beautifully painted sign that reads, Anhui Workshop. He shouts that if they unite under this banner, their name will be reborn anew and become completely uncontested under the heavens. The entire mob goes absolutely wild with joy, completely forgetting they came there to murder him. They cheer and celebrate as Johwi hands them over to his father for a detailed corporate briefing. Johwi watches them leave and smirks to himself, thinking, this right here is called a hostile takeover. Mergers and acquisitions. With his workforce now doubled, Johwi immediately pivots back to his expansion plans. He calls over his manager, Li Yosong, and orders him to station half of the newly acquired workers at the departure area. Manager Li's eyes widen. He asks if Johwi is finally planning on developing that specific carriage. Johwi chuckles confidently. He confirms that the new carriage utilizes advanced technology completely unknown to the Central Plains. He is going to integrate the use of plate suspension into the design. He notes that the moment this high-tech transportation hits the market, it will spark a massive commercial revolution and allow him to hold the entire merchant market in the palm of his hand. Manager Lee bows respectfully, completely impressed by his boss's infinite resourcefulness. Johwi notes that tomorrow they finally depart for Hefei and asks if everything is ready. Lee confirms that all preparations are complete. Lee asks how long the voyage to the Namgung clan will take. Johwi admits he cannot pinpoint an exact return date, as he has zero intention of coming back until his grand goal is achieved. Knowing that important business decisions will need to be made in his absence, Johwi hands manager Lee a custom ledger he wrote, containing solutions to every single problem he expects might arise while he is gone. The scene shifts to the open road. Johwi and his older brother are riding on horseback through a lush green forest. Johwi is sighing to himself, thinking about how he has only just gotten used to riding a horse after falling off constantly in the past, while his brother is somehow riding perfectly fine. His brother is completely distracted, deeply engrossed in reading a thick history book called the Manhwa. Johwi asks if the book is really that interesting, and his brother enthusiastically nods. Johwi just shakes his head, silently praying for the heavens to save this absolute martial arts geek. Suddenly, his brother snaps the book shut and turns completely serious. The playful demeanor disappears as he looks at Johwi and confesses that he still struggles to believe that Johwi is truly his little brother. He notes that while Johwi was always smart, he was never at this unbelievable level. He says that watching Johwi eloquently persuade the workshop elders earlier made him look like a monster living in another world. His brother looks down and says that just because Johwi is insanely competent, it doesn't mean his own life is any less serious. He brings up a dark memory, the Gawunki incident from years ago, when a ruthless group of bandits raided their village and stole food that was being handed out during a terrible harvest. A grim flashback shows their father being beaten into a pulp by the brutal bandits while his family watched helplessly. The brother turns to Johwi with fierce determination in his eyes, clenching his fist tightly against his chest. He explains that ever since that horrific day, he has trained non-stop, swearing to himself that he will become strong enough to protect his father and his little brother, and ensure that no one ever gets hurt again. Moved by his brother's hidden depth and genuine love, Johwi smiles softly. He reaches over and gives his brother a supportive fist bump, telling him he is sure he will do great. But the touching moment doesn't last long as his brother immediately gets annoyed by the casual gesture, swatting his hand away and yelling at the punk to get his hands off him, returning right back to their classic bickering dynamic. At the same time, the Yuichin crimson jade glowing inside Johwi's robes. Inside the artifact, the ancient ancestor smiles in absolute amusement, thinking to himself that with a sly silver tongue like that, Johwi could probably sell water straight from the Yangtze River. Still, the spirits lament that the modern descendants of the great Cho family have been reduced to struggling just to grow a mere smithy business. They complain that watching the family drop so low makes anger surge within them, though they admit Johwi is 1,000 times better than his father. Hearing them insult his family, Johwi snaps back in his thoughts, calling them a meddlesome bunch who only left behind a single jewel. The spirits are completely shocked. They shout at him, asking if he realizes how amazing the heavenly blood jade truly is and realizing he can hear them perfectly. They explain that because his soul is linked with the wheel of heavens, their minds are fully connected. Johwi calmly assesses the situation and notes that based on the voices, there seem to be exactly 8 spirits residing inside the jade. The spirits are deeply impressed by his quick wit and sharp intellect, chuckling over how fast he figured it out. Johwi downplays his intelligence, thinking back to his past life. He muses that while he always had a great memory and a way with words, he never considered himself a genius. Otherwise, he would have passed the modern civil servant examination on his very first try. The spirits realize his incredible intellect isn't just a basic soul upgrade, it is the ultimate trait of a reincarnated individual. They point out that the division of labor system he implemented at the blacksmith workshop is completely alien to their world, admitting it surprised all of them. Suddenly, a booming, arrogant voice chimed in. The spirit introduces himself as Mindiok, declaring that Johwi is still not worthy of becoming the next supreme king after him. Johwi's modern brain short-circuits, he gasps internally. Mindiok, are you talking about Cao Cao of the Three Kingdoms? He was the progenitor of my family. The legendary warlord himself corrects him, telling him not to be ridiculous. He explains that the Cho family existed long before him and that his own father was simply the adopted son of a eunuch. Even so, Cao Cao looks down on Johwi's corporate methods, scoffing that Johwi is just someone who gets people to work using money, questioning how a mere businessman could ever be a true king. This instantly sets Johwi off. He fires back aggressively, asking how else you are supposed to get employees to work, if not with money. He asks if they expect him to use slaves or if he should just hypnotize and brainwash his workers. The ancestors roar at his extreme rudeness, telling him to shut up and be quiet, while johwi mutters that he isn't even wrong. While johwi is busy arguing with the voices in his head, his older brother interrupts the mental silence, shouting in absolute excitement over the history chronicle he is reading. His brother reads aloud a legendary feat: a warrior nicknamed the Sword God, who single-handedly cut down all 8 great priests of the dark demonic cult and decapitated their leader in just 6 moves. Johwi recognizes the name, noting that the modern Heavenly Demon Fortress are the descendants of that very cult. The Heavenly Demon Fortress is widely known as the strongest group among the 3 corrupted heavens of the unorthodox faction. Johwi finds the story completely exaggerated, pointing out to his brother that there are no official records, names, or evidence left behind by this mysterious sword god. His brother laments that despite 2 whole books of legends written about the sword god, there are only 3 pages of actual verified information on him. Sensing a perfect opportunity, Cao Cao's spirit speaks up to Johwi. He asks if Johwi ever wondered why the descendants of a supreme king were forced to live in a broken-down countryside village. Johwi naturally replies that wealth never lasts past 3 generations. Cao Cao gets defensive, telling him not to underestimate his life's work. He reveals that he left behind a secret stash of 10,000 crates of gold, which Johwi instantly calculates to be a staggering 375 tons in modern measurements. Cao Cao drops the ultimate proposition. He wants to make a deal. He explains that their ancient enemies are still incredibly powerful, but with the ancestors' help, Johwi has a fighting chance. What does the Supreme King want in exchange? The complete and total extermination of the Sima family. Johwi realizes that the strange, intense hostility he always felt whenever the name Sima was mentioned was actually a cellular ancestral hatred passed down through his bloodline. But he tells the ghost it's an impossible request. The current Sima family are the direct descendants of the legendary sword god and are widely recognized as the strongest family in the entire world. How is a mere blacksmith owner supposed to take down global superpowers? To prove they mean business, Cao Cao calls out to the other spirits within the jade. He summons a spirit named Cho Chen and asks if he can teach Johwi martial arts. The spirit steps forward, introducing himself as Cho Chen, the legendary sword god himself and the exclusive successor of the secret sword tomb. Johwi realizes that the legendary figure his brother was just fanboying over is literally trapped inside his necklace. Next, Cao Cao calls upon a spirit named Kang, asking him to teach Johwi a secret meridian technique. Kang agrees, mentioning it would be easy as long as his own descendants aren't actively being wiped out by dark merchants. Cao Cao reveals that he has peeked into Johwi's modern memories, catching glimpses of airplanes, advanced technology, and modern corporate structures. He admits that modern civilization possesses knowledge he never could have dreamed of. Johwi is internally mortified, calling the ancient warlord a complete stalker. Cao Cao looks him dead in the soul and delivers the pitch. If they combine the martial might of the greatest historical ancestors with Johwi's supreme modern knowledge, they can completely reshape the world. He asks one final time if Johwi is ready to make the deal. With absolute determination, Johwi smiles and accepts. The scene shifts as the brothers finally arrive in the bustling, glowing city of Hefei. The streets are filled with hanging lanterns, crowds of people, and cheering street vendors. Looking at the massive crowd, Johwi is completely mesmerized, noting that the city runs like a massive, living mechanism. His older brother is acting like a complete country bumpkin, pointing at a massive crowd and asking a nearby old man if they are watching a Peking opera. The old man chuckles, calling them country folks, and Johwi politely chimes in, admitting they traveled all the way from Fengtai County. Suddenly, the performance on stage begins, and the crowd roars with excitement. The actors are performing a historical play showcasing the life of the heavenly sword, Namgung Su, the revered patriarch of the local Namgung family whom the people of Anhui absolutely idolize. While Johwi's brother is cheering with starry eyes, a group of arrogant, upper-class martial artists standing nearby look over at them with pure disgust. The wealthy martial artists begin loudly mocking the performance and the crowd, scoffing that the outrageous Peking opera is historical garbage. They loudly boast that according to the official chronicles of Jianghu history, the legendary person who actually defeated the southern jade blood demon wasn't the heavenly sword at all, but rather the heavenly lightning swordsman. One of the elitists smirks, pointing directly at Johwi and his brother, sneering. Hey, do you really think country bumpkins like them can even read an expensive book like the Chronicles of Jianghu's history? The local old man trembles in fear, recognizing their uniform and whispering in horror that they belong to the powerful Yeagle family. The crowd instantly parts, avoiding trouble as the elitists prepare to walk away. But they picked the wrong day to insult Johwi's family. Before Johwi can stop him, his older brother clenches his fists, turning around with absolute fury blazing in his eyes and roars across the festival square. "What shocking bullshit is that?" Johwi's face goes completely pale as he screams out for his brother, realizing they have just picked a fight with one of the most dangerous noble families in the region. The arrogant Yeagle master stops in his tracks, turning back with a terrifying, bloodthirsty smirk, demanding to know who the hell they think they are talking to. The older brother absolutely refuses to back down, yelling that he is a devoted reader of the martial arts Windstorm Journal. He aggressively argues that the story everyone believes is a total lie. He claims that when the legendary Heavenly Sword warrior returned to his clan after going missing for a year and a half, his entire physical body was completely covered in terrifying red palm prints. He boldly accuses the revered master of being the actual heavenly blood plunderer, insisting that everyone in the Anhui province secretly knows the truth. Johwi watches this unfold in absolute psychological horror. While he appreciates his brother's intense passion, his internal monologue is screaming. "No, hold on, your opponent is the literal Yeagle clan, you idiot. That is a major regional superpower." The Yeagle martial artists scoff, firing back with their own counter-evidence. They state that when those false rumors initially leaked, their master personally invited a top-tier martial authority named Changchen Jumhyok to his house to fact-check the claims, and it was the Namgung clan who panicked and refused the invitation. The historical debate goes back and forth until the Yeagle representative's eye turns dangerous. He steps forward, reminding the crowd that a man's words carry heavy physical responsibilities, preparing to draw blood for the insult. Before a deadly fight breaks out, Johwi springs into action. He leaps forward, slams his hand firmly over his brother's mouth to muffle his angry shouting, and begins bowing frantically to the Yeagle swordsman. He loudly announces to the crowd that his brother is a certified imbecile who has completely lost his mind, begging everyone to ignore the madman. He quickly drags his squirming brother away from the square, telling him they need to go home immediately, successfully de-escalating a deadly political crisis through pure comedic humiliation. Later that evening, the brothers are safely inside a private room at an inn. Johwi completely unloads on his brother, blasting him for breaking his solemn vow to remain silent and keep a low profile. He points out that they are in the middle of a massive market filled with dangerous eyes, and asks if he wants to be cut off financially and sent straight back home. His brother shrinks back, sweating profusely and muttering that if he takes things this seriously, he might just get promoted to a Murim leader. Johwi holds his head, groaning that this man is going to drive him insane. Thankfully, their bickering is interrupted when they meet up with a familiar face, the young master of the powerful Fire Dragon merchant group. Since they already know each other well through their established trade network, Johwi doesn't waste any time with pleasantries. He immediately shifts into executive mode and asks the young master for a deep, classified dive into the internal affairs of the great Namgung clan. Johwi explains that he doesn't want the basic public knowledge found in historical journals. He wants the real corporate intelligence, their current state, individual character traits, personal goals, secret preferences, internal conflicts, and any hidden corruption they are actively trying to conceal from the public. The young master of the Fire Dragon merchant group looks at him in sheer panic, pointing out that this is incredibly high-level information that a standard merchant organization simply can't touch. He mentions that legendary information networks like the Night Butterfly or the Forest Under the Moon might possess those secrets, but it's unclear if they even exist, and they would demand an astronomical fortune just for an audience. Worse yet, the young master of the Fire Dragon merchant group breaks down the sheer bureaucratic nightmare of trying to secure a meeting with the head of the clan Namgung Beak. He reveals that several hundred people line up at their gates every single day, with a massive portion of them being turned away and forced to leave without ever laying eyes on the chief. To filter through this chaotic, massive volume of visitors, the Namgung clan relies on a strict, highly elitist hierarchy system managed entirely through colored tier tokens. At the absolute top of this social pyramid are the gold tokens, which are distributed exclusively to high-ranking military commanders or imperial government officials. Just below them sit the silver tokens, handed out to wealthy elites, influential members of the middle class, or the prominent sons of famous martial families. Next are the bronze tokens, which are strictly allocated to individuals who already have direct connections with the Namgung clan, such as their collateral branch families or their official resource suppliers who manage their massive logistics for armaments, clothing, and rations. For wandering, unaffiliated martial artists, the clan issues red tokens, which are handed out to independent warriors looking to enter or test their strength against the clan. A brilliant tactical move that allows the Namgung family to continuously scout fresh talent and strengthen their faction's military power. Finally, at the absolute bottom tier of this brutal system are the blue tokens. These are relegated to standard merchants trying to close a routine trade deal, desperate solicitors, and small-time outsiders like johwi who have arrived simply to pitch a deal or ask for corporate sponsorships. Because johwi's family currently operates a basic regional blacksmith shop, they are strictly categorized as bottom-rung blue token applicants. The young master of the Fire Dragon merchant group sighs heavily, driving home the reality of the situation by warning johwi that even back when their own merchant group's operations were in peak condition, it took his own father over an entire month of sitting in miserable waiting rooms just to secure a single brief meeting with the patriarch. johwi thanks him for the incredibly candid briefing, realizing that standard corporate networking and waiting in line isn't going to cut it in this martial arts world. The following morning, his older brother heads out early for his morning practice, leaving johwi resting alone in bed. The moment the room is silent, the spirit of the ancient sword god, Cho-Chin, manifests inside his mind, demanding to know exactly when they are traveling to the legendary sword grave. johwi complains that the sword grave is located far away at the border separating the Gansu and Shanxi provinces. Traveling across two massive provinces from Anhui would take at least 4 to 5 weeks minimum, and that's assuming they don't run into active regional bandits or suffer a horse injury. He explains that he cannot simply abandon his current business negotiations with the Namgung clan, which could take months to finalize. The sword god gets completely infuriated, telling johwi he is taking his divine teachings for granted. He yells that regular disciples start training at 5 or 6 years old, while johwi is already turning 20. At his advanced age, his physical body is rapidly hardening, and his inner spiritual key meridians are closing up fast. The spirit decides he cannot wait any longer and declares a radical force solution. He says, "I shall borrow your body for a moment even if it means using up my energy, so be prepared." Before johwi can even utter a word of protest, the Yuichin Crimson Jade explodes with a blinding, crackling spiritual light. The ancient spirit violently forces its consciousness into control, temporarily possessing johwi's physical form. The ghost inspects johwi's hands, clicking his tongue and scoffing at how pathetic and weak the modern body is. To force a shortcut, the sword god begins violently channeling his own immense, ancient energy directly into johwi's physical shell, commanding the raw power to expand every single muscle fiber and forcefully rip open his hardened, closed key meridians all at once. A massive shockwave of spiritual pressure erupts inside the bedroom. johwi watches in absolute psychological horror from inside his own mind as his physical chest and abdomen violently expand, completely shredding his clothing to absolute tatters. In a matter of seconds, his average, soft physique undergoes a terrifying transformation, morphing into an absolute powerhouse of dense, superhuman, shredded muscles. johwi is initially stunned by the jaw-dropping physical upgrade, staring at his new, godlike physique. But his modern analytical knowledge immediately kicks in, reminding him of a dark law of martial arts lore. He nervously asks the ghost if forcing open locked meridians using raw, unnatural innate chi permanently drains a person's life force. The ancient ghost casually smirks, entirely unbothered, and drops a devastating financial bombshell. What's the problem with getting a simple 10-year life reduction? johwi's eyes pop completely out of his skull, screaming in pure, unadulterated horror as he realizes his new physical upgrade just cost him an entire decade of his biological life. He frantically berates the ghost of the sword god, demanding to know how he could act so recklessly because it isn't his own physical body. The ancient spirit remains entirely unbothered by the shouting. He smugly retorts that if johwi can successfully absorb his entire swordsmith knowledge and completely master his training, a mere 10 years of lost lifespan will be nothing to worry about. With the painful ritual completed, the sword god withdraws his energy, returning full control of the body back to johwi. The purple spiritual flames fade, and the sudden shift causes johwi to buckle and collapse. The ghost chides him for having such a frail mentality, wondering why he screams so much over a slight bit of pain. He then warns johwi that the sheer consumption of spiritual energy required for this transformation was far too great, meaning he won't be able to communicate or offer advice for a while. His final parting words urge johwi to keep both his body and his heart unwavering. Holding his head in localized pain, johwi slowly sits up, only to be struck by a wave of sensory overload. He looks out into the room and realizes his vision has fundamentally changed. His eyes, which had grown incredibly weary from numerous years of intensely reading corporate files and books in his past life, are now as clear as day. He stares into the distance in absolute awe, recognizing that it is physically impossible for a normal human being to possess such staggering eyesight. Furthermore, a strange warmth circulates within him. Testing his new physical reflexes, he swings his arm through the air and balls his hand into a tight fist, marveling at the incredible inner strength flowing through his muscles. For the first time, he genuinely understands why his older brother is so utterly obsessed with martial arts. Though he doesn't yet know the true extent of his newly awakened combat abilities, he smiles, knowing they will definitely be of great help in managing his day-to-day corporate grind. He dusts himself off and tells his brother it's time to head straight to the Namgoon clan. When they arrive at the bustling gates of the Namgoon clan, they find themselves staring down a massive logistical bottleneck. A stern martial artist guarding the grand entrance directs the endless crowd of visitors to write their personal details and names down in the guest book before making their way over to the customer hospitality hall. Johwi steps forward calmly, picking up the brush to elegantly write down his name and faction, Johwi of the Manhwa workshop. Standing right behind him, his older brother swells with pride, internally deciding that he should sign his name down with the grand title of martial artist Johwi. Johwi glances back over his shoulder and scoffs at his brother's childish antics, ordering him to hurry up. Nearby, elite visitors smirk and scoff at them, whispering about what a pair of country idiots they are. As they step inside the massive, packed hospitality courtyard filled with rows of round dining tables, the pure scale of the crowd sets in. Johwi looks around excitedly, whispering that even the low-ranking guard watching the guest book looks terrifyingly fierce, and fanboys over what martial arts league the inner residents might belong to. Johwi, however, keeps his mind on efficiency. He looks at the sea of hundreds of people and sighs, realizing that if they wait in line normally to receive a bottom-tier blue token, it is going to take them an eternity. But just as he begins calculating a faster way to bypass the line, an elderly man steps out from the crowd and approaches them. Johwi turns around in surprise, recognizing him as the elegant old man they met in the city square the previous day. The old man smiles warmly, noting he doubted his eyes at first but is thrilled to see the two brave young men again. Johwi politely bows, apologizing that they couldn't properly say goodbye during the chaotic street riot. Johwi joins in, cheerfully asking if the elder has some personal business to tend to at the palace. The old man simply chuckles, but before anyone can reply, the head hospitality representative of the Namgoon clan rushes over. Bowing deeply and sweating in pure panic, the manager addresses the old man, calling him the vice chief and asking for his direct orders. Johwi and Johwi freeze in absolute shock as the true identity of the country elder is revealed. Without skipping a beat, the vice chief points directly at the brothers and commands, "Give these young men gold tokens and send them to the Great Hall." The manager gasps, desperately trying to protest. He points out that based on the rigid clan regulations, simple blacksmith merchants are strictly required to receive blue tokens. Furthermore, he argues that outsiders should never be permitted into the normal residential zones, let alone the sacred Great Hall. The vice chief instantly roars, silencing the manager on the spot. He angrily barks that while the younger generation of their clan is always acting busy with their elite warrior duties, these two brave outsiders were the only ones who actually stood up against those arrogant Yeagle punks to defend the honor of the South. He demands to know if the manager dares to stop him from simply repaying his personal debt of gratitude with some fine alcohol. Terrified of the vice chief's wrath, the manager immediately submits, obeying the order and granting the brothers immediate top-tier VIP access. Now they escorted deep into the luxurious VIP estate, the brothers sit at an elegant table enjoying fine tea. While Johwi is happily enjoying the massive upgrade and treatment, Johwi's sharp eyes wander over to the expensive, ancient landscape paintings hanging on the walls of the palace. He notes that the art style looks explicitly like the paintings of the ancient Yingsu generation. His internal thoughts instantly awaken a different spirit resting within the jade, the ghost of the Hanlim great scholar Johwi from 300 years ago. The scholar's spirit manifests in a dark purple aura, demanding to know if Johwi is absolutely certain of his art history, haughtily asking how he dares to think lightly of a great scholar's eyes. Johwi quickly apologizes in his mind. The scholar snorts proudly, stating that just because he is an ancient ghost doesn't mean he has no skill. He commands Johwi to look closer, identifying the piece as the legendary stellar cherry blossom painting, originally discovered by the legendary great scholar Hyo-jinya of the Han dynasty and presented directly to the Han imperial family. The spirit provides an incredible, vivid breakdown of the painting's composition. It was not painted using ordinary Chinese ink. Those cherry blossoms in full bloom were painted using rooster's blood. The countless stars you see were painted using ground jewels, and those trees were painted using charcoal. The spirit laments that Hyojinya was worried until his very last breath that the unique materials would cause the colors to fade away over time, making its flawless, pristine preservation inside the Namgung estate a genuine historical miracle. The scholar admits he would love to personally reward the preserver for doing such a spectacular job. Fascinated by this high-level historical data, Johwi walks right up to the wall, openly admiring the piece. He speaks his thoughts aloud, marveling at how a masterpiece painted over 1,000 years ago using rooster blood and crushed jewels hasn't faded in color by a single fraction. Suddenly, a loud smash echoes through the room. The brothers turn around to see the elderly vice chief standing there, staring at Johwi in complete breathless shock, having dropped his expensive ceramic teapot flat onto the floor. Trembling with pure awe, the vice chief demands to know how on earth a young countryside boy could instantly recognize the hidden stellar cherry blossom painting. He reveals that not even Anhui's greatest living scholars or the finest historical painters in the land could identify the true origin of this specific piece. He admits that in his entire 80 years of living, this is easily the most shocking moment he has ever experienced. Desperate to know the boy's background, the vice chief frantically asks which prestigious academic academy he belongs to. Realizing he accidentally talked out loud and blew his cover, Johwi begins to sweat, cursing himself internally. Fortunately, the scholar's spirit bail him out, telling him not to worry and instructing him to simply claim that he is a direct descendant of Man Sangjo. Johwi asks who that is, and the spirit smugly reveals it was his personal legendary alias when he traveled the Gangho 3 centuries ago. Placing a hand confidently over his chest, Johwi looks the vice chief in the eye and announces, "I am Man Sangjo's descendant." The name hits the vice chief like a physical strike. He stumbles back, gasping out the name of the great researcher. He puts the pieces together, realizing that Johwi must be the long-lost descendant of the Hanlim great scholar Johyu. He begins weeping tears of joy, declaring that the fact this legendary researcher left behind a brilliant living bloodline is a monumental joy for the entire Zhongyuan continent. Right at that moment, heavy footsteps echo through the corridor as a massive, booming voice rings out. "Oh, has my bookworm younger brother finally found himself a disciple?" A giant, imposing old man with wild, flowing white hair and a fierce beard storms into the room, accompanied by his other brother. These two are actually the brothers of our old man, the vice chief, and they've both marched over together to see what the commotion is about. The vice chief frantically waves his hands in denial, telling them that he wouldn't dare dream of taking the boy as a student when he is the direct descendant of the great man Sangjo. The wild-haired brother blinks, completely blanking on the academic name, asking who the hell that is, to which the vice chief dryly sighs, replying it's just a certain someone. The brother processes the information for a split second, confirming that the boy isn't actually a disciple yet. The moment he realizes Johwi is a free agent, his eyes light up with pure predatory greed. He reaches out a massive hand, grabs Johwi tightly by the collar and loudly declares, "Then this guy is mine." The vice chief snaps, screaming at his brother that there is a strict hierarchy and order to everything, even when serving cold water. He furiously berates him for trying to aggressively steal a man right out from under his nose. But the brother completely ignores the screaming as he and the other sibling hyperfocus on Johwi's physical body. They've come to check him out, and the wild-haired brother narrows his eyes with absolute precision. He looks down at Johwi's soft hands, analyzing him on the spot. The boy has clearly never held a combat blade in his life, and there are absolutely zero physical signs of his body being trained in standard martial arts. Yet looking closer, a terrifying anomaly is revealed. The brothers realize that Johwi's body has fully undergone a legendary exfoliation, a mythical state where a human body completely shatters its physical limits, undergoing a total cellular metamorphosis and complete rejuvenation. On top of that, every single one of his hidden ki channels and physical strength channels have been violently forced wide open. The old men's minds reel in absolute disbelief. A body like this shouldn't belong to a merchant boy. It is the literal physical symbol of an absolute master. Because these brothers are grandmasters who stand at the peak of martial arts, they can easily track the internal energy acceleration of others. They observe that Johwi's inner acceleration is growing greater by the literal second, admitting they have never met a human being with such an astronomical rate of natural growth. The elderly masters stand over a completely bewildered Johwi, mentally calculating his terrifying potential. They estimate that at this ridiculous pace, Johwi's physical transformation will be 100% complete within a mere 3 years, cementing him as an absolute master. In terms of raw inner strength, he would easily become entirely unmatched across the entire world, leaving him with only the final stage of spiritual enlightenment to achieve. The weight of this realization hits the room like a thunderclap. To put this in perspective, across the entire global jianghu in their current era, there have only ever been 7 legendary warriors who successfully stood above the gangho and achieved the grand state known as the boundary of the absolute. And this 20-year-old kid is on track to become the 8th. The elder points out that while the physical talent is absolute, achieving true spiritual enlightenment is never easy. His brother laughs it off, stating that given the boy's incredibly young age, it's practically a guarantee. Meanwhile, the old man has Johwi by the collar, pulling him close in a firm grip. Johwi looks awkward and panicked, quickly saying, "Elder, please let go of me first, I can't breathe." Hearing that, the old man laughs and releases him while Johwi catches his breath and rubs his chest. Suddenly, the massive old man leans down, placing his face inches away from Johwi's nose, and drops a completely unhinged question with an intense grin. "Do you have any thoughts about changing your last name? I will treat you like my own flesh and blood child. I'll immediately inform the clan leader and receive an official stamp from him." Before Johwi can even process the idea of a corporate name change, the old man clenches his fist and screams in pure excitement. "No, screw that, I'll just adopt you right now." Johwi's face completely drops, yelling out a stunned, hysterical pardon. As he realizes he went from a bottom-tier merchant trying to pitch a standard business sponsorship to being violently adopted by the grandmaster brother of the clan's vice chief. And that wraps up the opening arc. Honestly, watching an ordinary modern guy get thrown into the absolute chaos of the Murim world has been an amazing ride, and trust me, the story only gets crazier from here. Now I want to hear from you, which moment from the opening arc was your favorite? Let me know down in the comments because I genuinely enjoy reading your thoughts. One more thing, I might not continue this series very frequently for now. If you'd like to see the next chapters as soon as possible, let me know in the comments. The more interest I see, the sooner I'll bring the next part. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.